So here I am in the area of Schipfe in Zürich, and I'm sitting by the river Limmat, just at the place where in 1528 Felix Mantz, one of the first Anabaptist martyrs, was drowned, just in the middle of the river there. And there's a memorial table there which is telling the story of how Mantz was martyred, taken into a fishing platform just in the middle of the river there, and drowned, weighted down and drowned. He'd been dragged on a hurdle through these streets to this point, and he was taken over there and thrown in. They called it the third baptism. The first baptism was the baptism by the Catholic Church as a baby. The second baptism they dared to perform was the baptism of adults, of believers. And the third baptism was finishing up in the river Limmat, just here. I wondered how it would feel coming here. It's actually quite ordinary. It's in the middle of a busy city, trams going by. Very peaceful in one sense, lovely Swiss city, beautiful weather. But nonetheless, it's very meaningful to be in a place which has significance. It's worth coming all this way for. So here I am standing on the Münsterbrücke over the Limmat River, and behind me is the Grossmünster, which was Ulrich Zwingli's church. And Ulrich Zwingli was one of the original reformers in the early 1520s. He got groups of young men together, and they studied in the original languages, Greek, Hebrew, Latin, German, and it was him really who was responsible for the Anabaptists' start, because they saw in the scriptures things that he didn't, and instead of linking in with the baptism, he decided he was going with the state, and so that's where the whole problem came from. So we're going to go into the Grossmünster and have a look at what's in there today. Sitting in the Grossmünster in Zürich, very plain church, but in the guide there's no mention of the Anabaptists here, even though this was a place that they began their journey with Zwingli. Very plain, very beautiful church, but no mention of the Anabaptists. Okay, so here I am back outside the Grossmünster behind me, and this is the place on this square where Christopher Froschauer had his book printers, and I've just seen a copy of the Zürcher Bibel, which is the Bible which Zwingli translated from the Greek and the Hebrew, and they worked on together, and Christopher Froschauer printed. But Froschauer was actually one of those who became an Anabaptist, and he moved to Moravia to be with Hubmaier and printed a lot of his pamphlets. But again, as I say, no mention of the Anabaptists, no mention of the dissenters. So we're going to go on down to Zollikon and visit the village where the Anabaptists were chased off to in order to be a bit safer from the Zürich town authorities. So here I am standing in the Neustadtgasse, and it was in this street that the first adult baptisms took place in January 1525, in one of the houses here, when Konrad Grebel baptised Georg Blaurock in the house of Felix Mantz. We're not sure which house it was. There was a house very similar to one of these in this street where it all started. I'm quite encouraged because just behind me in Gasse, which is just off Neustadtgasse, where the first adult baptisms took place, is a Freie Evangelische Gemeinde of Zürich, which is the free church in Zürich. So they're still here and they're still going strong just behind me. So here I am in the village of Zollikon, just outside Zürich. Beautiful day, very peaceful, quiet. And just behind me is the house where the first Baptist congregation met, and they baptized together, they worshipped together for a number of months during 1525 until the city authorities came and got them and imprisoned them in the Wellenberg prison. There's a memorial tablet on the side of the building. Remind us this is one of the first places where the Anabaptists met and the Free Church movement began, at 23 Stadtstraße in Zollikon. I'm going to continue up to the church, which you can hopefully hear the bells of at the moment. So here I am, having climbed up the steep path from the house in Stadtstraße, sitting here at the Radical Reformed Church, and behind me is a table that actually has the information about the church here, reminding us that this was a centre of the Anabaptist movement between 1523 and 1525. It says there, Zollikon und seine Kirche als Zentrum der Wiedertäuferbewegung. That's Zollikon and its church as a centre of the Anabaptist movement. And through these doors here, just beside us, is the entrance to the church, which are closed unfortunately at the moment. But it's in this church that Georg Blaurock, one of the leading Anabaptists, would have gone and demanded to preach, because he said that he had as much right to preach as anyone else. So this is lovely to come to. It's lovely and cool sitting here. Seems like an ideal place, very peaceful, and away from the Zürich authorities until they managed to catch up with them. So it's good to be here in Zollikon. Perhaps left the quietness of Zollikon behind, come down to the side of the lake here. It's absolutely awesome looking back up to Zürich city, and just fantastic Alps in the distance. Just an amazing place to be on pilgrimage. So this is the famous Goldenes Dachel, the golden roof in the old town of Innsbruck, and that tree just to the left of it marks the spot of the plaque where Jakob Hutter was burned. He was burned on this square here in front of the Goldenes Dacho. So just behind me here is the memorial tablet to Jakob Hutter, the leader of the Hutterites, who originally was from the South Tyrol, the area to the south of here, which is now in Italy, was cut off from Austria at the end of the First World War. And Jakob Hutter led the Hutterites originally in Moravia, but then was arrested. When he came back here to Austria to do more missionary work after Moravia, he came here and was arrested and was condemned to death by burning here on this square in front of the Goldenes Dacho, which we'll see in a moment, the golden roof.
Scusi. Hello.
So here I am in the centre of Vienna, or rather just on the outskirts, and this here is part of the old city wall. The gate here was called the Stubentor, and here in the wall of the Stubentor is a plaque to the memory of Balthasar Hubmaier, who was burned here on the 10th of March 1528 in front of the Stubentor as a Baptist. He was the founder, one of the founders of the religious tolerance thinkers, and it's recorded here that he says, Christus ist nicht gekommen, dass Metzger, Morde und brenne. It means Christ isn't come that he should butcher, kill and burn. And this is his memorial here in the outskirts of the city centre of Vienna. Just behind me here is the tablet commemorating Balthasar Hubmaier, who originally was from the centre, from the south of Germany, from Waldshut, and then he went to Moravia, where he founded colonies there in Nikolsburg, which is now Mikolov, and then he came back here into Austria, and he was actually arrested eventually and taken captive and burned here at the Stubentor.
Okay.
So here I am in Veľké Levaré, and behind me is one of the Anabaptist houses. This whole area around here is called the Anabaptist Quarter, Habanský dvor in Slovak, and this was built 1600s by the Hutterites who came and settled here, fleeing the persecutions from both Catholics and Protestants further west in Europe. And here they found refuge. In fact, some of them had come from the Moravia across the river in Czech, and they came to settle here because in Slovakia, in Habsburg lands at that time, they found more protection. So that's why they were here until well into 1700s. And I'm going to go in and have a look at the museum, hopefully look at some of their ceramic work. And this is a very peaceful place where they came to, and this is where they had their settlement here in Veľké Levaré. So just here in the centre of the Habanský dvor, there is a setup here where people can come, because this is actually a European Union protected site. Obviously this is a place where people come, perhaps school parties. There are presentations here given about the site. This is where they come and sit down. So here I am. This is in the museum of the Habanský dvor, the museum of the Anabaptists. And this would be a typical Anabaptist house where people would live together. You can see we're quite little people because the beams are quite low here, and we had to watch our heads as we came in the door. But around here, some of the furniture that we've been in the house, some of it may be original, some of it later. But it's got a great feel to it, a great sense of age. great smell to it of an old house, but it's really good to be able to have a look. So I'll look around and see what else we can see.
No.
So this is another part of the museum which is dedicated to the work of the Anabaptists. They were very good carpenters and potters, and their work was well known in the area because they were such hard workers. They only took a quarter of an hour to have their lunch and they would be back to their work, so they were really given to their work. And you can see some of the examples. Here's a cradle made in the Anabaptist style, and then through here you have some of their ceramic work and ironwork, which was made by them, for which they were very much known. They did a lot of decoration work as well. So that's typical, and some of the textile work that they were doing as well. And in fact, they became very well known, and some of the communities became quite rich. Even though they were trying to live simple lifestyles, they actually became very rich because they were known for their good work, which is quite a compliment, or it's quite a recommendation to their Christian lifestyle. So where we are now, this is the part of the house, the museum, which was the workshop. It actually belonged to a man called Rudolf Iser, the house, and the various arts of the Anabaptists that are represented here. So there's carpentry tools, and there's ceramics around, and also there's some of their clothing here. They were great textile makers, and there's some lace around. And they were very hard-working, very simple people, given to their work, and yet they became known for it in the neighbourhood. So many people came and bought their stuff, which was highly decorated and was very valued, even by the aristocracy. And so this was the place in the house where they would have worked, the workshops. O, dobre, ďakujem, veľmi pekné.
Tak super. Ešte dole.
So we've just been allowed to come upstairs in the house. We have a very helpful lady who's helping us get around the place. And this was actually, the upstairs was their sleeping quarters. They would live downstairs and work downstairs, and then up here was where the families would come and sleep. There's not much to see except the beams here, which are the original beams that divided off the rooms. And you can see from the division of the beams how the rooms would have been separated and then covered in plaster, and walls would have been here rather than just open beams. But it's a really amazing sight, just a wonderful example of how the Anabaptists would have lived in their community. So this building here is the Anabaptist chapel where they came to worship, and it's been preserved as a memorial place. And this is their place where they came and met together. So they very kindly specially opened the chapel for us here, which today is a Catholic chapel, but this would have been the meeting house of the Habani, of the Anabaptists here in Velké, Levaré. And you can see it's very simple. The altar's there, but we've got the wooden benches, and it's a really beautiful field. So this is where they would have gathered for their communal Bible studies, for their prayer times, for their councils, because they worked together, they studied together, they read together. So it's a wonderful place to have been. So it's great to have got the chance to come in, especially open for us.
No.
Dobre. Just wanted to include our friends here from Slovakia. There's Pani Michalikova and Pan Kleinedler. Now, Pan Kleinedler has an original Anabaptist family name. It's a German name because still here in Veľké Levaré there are families who can trace back their heritage to the Anabaptists, and Mr. Kleinedler is one of those as well. Veľmi pekne ďakujem za ten čas. Ďakujem. So we've just driven out of Slovakia. We're now in the Czech Republic, and we're in a beautiful vine growing area here we're in Moravia, what used to be Moravia, the Moravia area. And here you can see behind me is the vineyard, the big place that makes wine, which is called Habanské sklepy, which means Anabaptist cellars. And there's a make of wine that's actually called Anabaptist cellars, which they make here because this is where the Anabaptists were called to look after the vineyards. So they had a tradition of winemaking, and so that's why there's still a label called Anabaptist cellars. So this is a big surprise because we came to the Habanské sklepy vineyard here, winemakers, and they've kindly allowed me to just come down here and have a look at the original 17th century wine cellars, which the Anabaptists built so that they could make this good wine, which is lying here now, which we've actually managed to get a couple of bottles of and looking forward to tasting. But this is the work of the Hutterites, of the Anabaptists. And it's very impressive. It's everything's still here. They've even made new parts. They've kept them in the style of these old cellars because obviously they're so good for wine, and this is why the Anabaptist has such a good reputation, because they made such good wine. Quite a privilege.